Welcome to Acumen, where we are doing a spotlight on internal audit. And today we have Thanzil Khan, who's overseeing our national offering for internal audit. And Thanzil used to oversee the internal audit for a national firm in the top 10. And he's worked for he's done internal audit for national retailers, very prestigious banks, as well as a stint in some regulators.
Thank you for having me, Edmund.
Why don't you go into your introduction a bit more, because I've probably just been way too high level.
No, well, my name is, as Edmund said, my name is Thanzil Khan, and I head up Acumen's internal audit offering here in our lovely head office in Ealing. I've been in this field for about 20 years. It's the only thing that I know, and worked across a variety of sectors and industry, as you rightly pointed out. Ranging from your financial services, your insurance, your retail, manufacturing, fintech on one side, and on the other side, lots of public sector and government bodies, including central and local authorities. So very much we've kind of the full gambit in the 20 years or so I've been in this field.
Yeah, brilliant. 20 years in the industry, you don't look old enough.
Oh, please.
So what is internal audit, and why might a business think, if they don't already have it and they're not already doing anything to do with it,
Sure.
why would they start thinking, gosh, I really need to start thinking about that? And is there anything in the news that might have kind of made them think, should make them think, let's reach out to these guys?
Yeah, I mean, a good question. So in simple terms, internal audit, we help organisations to tell them what's working and what's not. We help them identify some of the day-to-day risks that affect their business. Where are the pinch points, what's working, what's not, and work in collaborations to help them meet their objectives. That's very kind of essence in a very kind of simplified way. The work of internal audit is overseen by the Chartered Institute of Internal Auditors, which is the only body in the UK that mandates the work and sets standards and the framework upon which we have to follow all our work. It is affiliated with the Global Internal Audit Institute of Internal Auditors. So the IIA, as it's kind of the acronym, they set standards. So only in January of last year, the new standards were updated. There are in total 5 domains and 15 sort of principal that sit underneath each of those. And what is really important is your domain 2, and that really talks about independence and objectivity. So whilst we work really closely with management, senior leadership teams, C-suite executives, what's really fundamental in all of this is we remain independent, because we need to be able to operate independently and objectively, and that's the kind of an important facet of what we do.
Sounds really broad. It sounds like internal audit could cover almost anything you wanted, almost.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, Edmund. I mean, I look back when I first started off in internal audit back in 2005. Back then, it was very much kind of number crunching, bean counting, and just looking at the financial processes of a business. And over the years, that's changed massively. I think that traditionalist view of internal audit probably doesn't sit accurately in 2026. We're far more broader now. We look at governance, we look at risk management. Businesses are a lot more different to how they were 20 years ago. You've got improvements in technology. There's AI. We used to operate within an island, but now they are global. There are departments, there are outsourcing operations, there will be entities abroad. A lot of our clients, they might have a team in the UK, but they also have, teams all across the world. So because of all of those changes in risk landscape and some of the challenges, I think the role of internal audit has certainly changed. And it's far more broader. Even the latest internal audit standards, the definition of internal audit has somewhat changed to reflect the changing needs of the business environment that we're in today.
So apart from financial, what, let's go through some examples. What's some of the stuff that people might not think falls under your remit but does?
Of course, so you've got your core finances is an important part of what we do. The engine room of any organisation is a finance function. And within the finance function, we're able to specifically look at some areas. So whether that's looking at core finance function, whether that's looking at anti-fraud controls, whether whether that's looking at finance manual and providing reviewing policies and procedures, it does really cover a number of subsets within organisations. Quite often we also look at corporate governance, for example. So what we tend to find that when organisations grow financially, quite often that the governance side of it gets left behind. So we get asked to review the governance processes.
So you're looking at the procedure of making sure governance happens, or are you talking about the structure to make sure there's this committee doing this and this committee to looking at that? Or is it both?
It's a bit of both. So we look at the framework that underpins corporate governance, and we also look at to what extent that's working as effectively as it should. So we will look at terms of references. We'll look at we'll review the composition of the board. What sort of training is in place? Are they meeting regularly? Are minutes being taken? Are actions being followed up?
Yeah.
It all depends on the specific needs of the client. So, for example, recently we were approached by a charity to look at their corporate governance because there were concerns that whilst the fundraising aspect of the charity has done really well, they felt that the governance has been left behind. So we're asked to do a kind of root and branch review of the corporate governance function. So it all depends on the nature and the type of organisation they are.
Brilliant. Yeah, no, it's very broad, and I think there's also, to a certain extent, covering off IT audit as well.
Absolutely.
Which is a whole nother aspect to internal audit, isn't it?
It is indeed. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, cybersecurity is probably the biggest risk facing any organisation.
And Land Rover Jag spring to mind.
Yes, absolutely, and the co-op as well recently. I mean, these are just some of the high-profile ones that's been in the press and media. I mean, there are lots of smaller organisations who are targeted, and they are unfortunately exposed to such risks. And what we tend to find is historically, cyber risk was seen to be a risk that would, be exposed to larger businesses, whereas businesses who are exposed to international scenario, that's no longer the case. Even last year, we heard stories of primary schools being targeted by cyber criminals for not to hold them, to ransom, but for some of the data that they hold, which will be valuable to rogue actors out there. So you're right, digital risk is very high. Digital transformation is also another risk that we're seeing. A lot of businesses are changing the way they do their business. There's technology improvement, there's the emergence of AI, so all of that obviously increases the level of risks that they may be exposed to.
And say, for example, we're talking about a business that's already good quality business in whatever metrics we're talking. Why would they be looking at internal audit, and why should they not fear it? Why should they embrace it? What benefits are they going to see?
Yeah, so some sectors are mandated to have internal audit. So if you look at your financial services,
banks,
your banks, they have to have it.
Yeah.
Look at the public sector, that's also a requirement.
Yeah.
But there are other sectors where it's not fully mandated, i.e. the charity sector. If you look at the charity, the regulators, but it's recommended. So many organisations actually see the value of internal audit. So we always, some organisations will approach us because something's gone wrong and they want us to investigate so they can fix it. Other organisations would be proactive and say, well, actually, we understand the value of your work. We'd like to have a program of work, or they may even say we want a one-off piece of review on anti-fraud controls, for example, so we can come in. I always say that prevention is better than cure, and those organisations who are more proactive when it comes to governance, when it comes to risk management. Statistically, the chances of success is a lot higher than those organisations that view internal audit as an expenditure on their.
I always saw it, and you'll have to tell me if I'm wrong on this because you're the expert, but I always saw it as really prepping for the worst case scenario, even though you're always hoping it never happens, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And checking that people are really, adhering to the policies and procedures that are in place that prevent the absolute worst things from happening.
Yeah.
Like the things we've just mentioned, the M&S, the Land Rover and Jaguar things that they've had to go through. If they were a little bit more hot on getting people to go and check, possibly from an external source, so they're not sort of self-checking their work and stuff, and giving it a rubber stamp and saying, actually, you've done a good job, or these are the improvements you need to make. Maybe they wouldn't have had the things that have happened recently.
Yeah, and you're right, Edmund. Obviously, we don't know the full details of what's behind the scene, but we know about those organisations who have mutual systems and processes, who have a kind of a clearly defined 3 lines model, i.e. your first line and your second line is your management and the people running and your policies and procedures, and your third line is the likes of internal audit. If there is that system robust, the chances of something going wrong is much lower than if they didn't have those things in place. But obviously we're kind of speculating at this moment, and I'm sure over time there will be certain reports out in the public domain which we can scrutinise and provide commentary on. But just goes to show that no business, however big or small, is immune to it, because we could all be exposed to it. But there are certain things that we just by reading the headlines, making sure, if you use cyber as an example, your patch testing, your staff are fully trained on cyber management, good simulation testing, and policies and procedures regularly tested, and so on and so forth. So these are all kind of some of the basics of what businesses should be doing.
And from your experience, because obviously you've worked across multiple sectors, pretty much the full gambit from what you've said earlier, which industries do you think are typically on top of internal audit, and which industries do you think need to look at it a bit more typically, from your experience, without wanting to be harsh to people? Some sectors don't know what no one knows what they don't know, and we've certainly seen in the sort of not-for-profit sector in all areas of the business, actually, where we're supporting them with external audit, independent examinations, statutory accounts, whatever it is, because they're run by well-meaning volunteers typically, and they sometimes struggle to get the right trustees. They are unaware of even some of the basics, let alone things like internal audit, for example. But you might have other sectors that where people need to sort of think about it a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I mean, we've had clients in a particular industry. If I use the banking industry, because we used to refer to that before, where some clients are really good at what they do. They've got good, robust risk management processes in place. They've got the 3 lines defence model clearly articulated. Their compliance function is working as it's intended. And then the internal audit function, our job becomes so much more easier. But I've also had clients in the past in the same sector where the systems and processes were not as robust, and they were still on that journey. And it's always a journey, don't get me wrong, but probably at the embryonic stages of that journey. Likewise, if I use public sector or charities or other sectors, you're always going to have some organisations much more mature than others. So it's very difficult to pinpoint to a particular sector or industry. I think a lot of that is probably more specific to an organisation, how it's run, how quickly it's grown, whether they're going through any significant transformation. We've had a client meeting last week where they've just acquired another business in a similar sector, almost like a vertical integration. Prior to that, the business was operating absolutely fine. As soon as the takeover's taken place, they're worried that there are gaps in the finance function, there are gaps in corporate governance. So things can change really easily. My advice to all of those organisations is, if you are going through a period of change, whether that's developing or implementing new software, or a merger or an acquisition of another business, or something that would significantly change your business model, internal audit would be a really good offering that can actually look at and then advise you accordingly.
Okay, less so industry specific, more so change specific.
Yeah.
significant change which might increase risk in any part of your business, whether that's financial, operational, governance, whatever.
Yeah.
Cool. And I suppose it's, as much as it's important to sort of understand what internal audit does cover, and it is quite broad as we've discussed, it's also probably just as important to understand what internal audit does not cover. There's probably some misconceptions out there. You've heard them all, I'm sure. Which one of those things that people think we do cover in internal audit, do we not?
Unfortunately, there are some misconceptions. I mean, I've had meetings with prospective clients, and we're a bit tender hooks about meeting internal audit, thinking it's someone with a white lab coat and a clipboard, but actually it's far from it. Internal audit is very much a trusted advisory role rather than a necessary evil, which some organisations may see it as. We work very much in unison with our clients, with management. We make sure that we remain independent, yet we're an extension to their team, if that makes sense. And we work kind of holistically. One of the things that we're not is we do not police organisations. We do not regulate. We're not a regulator, and we certainly don't take on the role of management. So it's really important that distinction is made. So we're not management. We're not the decision makers. We make recommendations based on what we found, and it's really the management. They have to implement those if they agree to our recommendations.
So you're really advisors to the management?
We are, and that's when I think being objective and independent, that element of separation is really important.
And I suppose, we've talked about when organisations might have that light bulb moment. I need to get an internal auditor involved, or at least we've talked about organisations that might not be aware they need it, but should really start thinking about needing it. Should they have significant change in the business or the organisation or whatever? But are there sort of light bulb moments, I suppose, where you've seen something's happened in an organisation and they're like, it triggers them to reach out? Is there a common theme in those?
Yeah. I mean, the simple answer is yes, absolutely. Most of the inquiries that we receive is as a result of either an incident has happened or a near miss to an incident. And depending on what the nature of the incident or the near miss is, we're able to structure and have that conversation with those prospective clients. And quite often it's actually quite refreshing to have those kind of candid conversations, and when you get to hear some of what's keeping them awake at night, or what the incident is, and that's when we can come in and look at it retrospectively. It's the value that we can provide is probably best that when we have those conversations at the early stages, so that way we can put the necessary mitigated actions and recommendations in place that may prevent. There's no guarantee, because when an incident, if something was to happen, it will happen, but it's about managing that risk and minimising the impact, and we can make those recommendations to help them.
And there's no harm just calling us up.
Absolutely.
We're not the sort of firm that would charge for a initial, exploratory meeting. I'm sure if someone called you up, I called the office up and said they want to speak to you, and said, look, I just want to talk something through with you. Something's happened. I want to see, is there something you can help with? Should we be thinking about X, Y, and Z?
Yeah.
That's the sort of thing we would happily do, isn't it?
Absolutely, and I think that's this kind of Acumen way of working, isn't it? Is we genuinely care about our clients, and open door policy. They can pick up the phone anytime or contact us. So we'll be more than happy to assist in any way possible.
And I guess it'd be interesting to hear some case studies where things have gone really badly wrong, or maybe you've been brought in just after something's happened and it's almost too late, and it would have been better if you'd been brought in earlier. Do you have some case studies like that are kind of worth talking about? Don't mention any names, obviously.
I try not to. Yeah, I mean, there's been a few kind of notable situations over the past sort of 15, 20 years. I mean, what we tend to find, and that's you'd be surprised, it's quite common actually, so when we go to an organisation, one of the first things that we may do is to look at the policies and procedures. And more often than not, they tend to be well written, well articulated. It covers those things that we expect to see. So the next phase of our work will be so this is what your policy says. let's confirm whether it's actually working in practice. And that's where that devolution tends to take place, where there's a disconnect between what you're saying and what they're saying versus what's happening in reality. There's one particular organisation who went out of their way to create a 100-page finance manual. It covered everything. So even it's almost a dummy's guide to a finance team, and we're really impressed. But when it came to the fieldwork, when the team were on site,
no one was using it.
Well, actually, no one actually had heard of the finance. So that's just an example where it's really important that when you are developing policies and procedures, that there is buy-in from your wider team. If there is a need to train them, then that needs to be done. That needs to be regularly refreshed as well. It's not a document that you do and it's put in a cabinet and it collects dust. Is very much a live document, and it should be continually reviewed as and when needed. Usually annually. Some organisations do it every 2 years, or when it's necessary and there's a changes in regulation.
And that probably wasn't the worst ever thing. What's the absolute worst ever thing that you come across?
Probably not for the cameras.
Okay. When we're looking at a client and assessing what they need, I mean, are there some telltale signs, that say to you, the client already has it sorted? They've already they know what good looks like with respect to internal audit?
Yeah, I mean, there's two ways to look at it. I mean, there are some telltale signs where you know that things can potentially go wrong, and it's almost so if there's been wholesale changes to the leadership team, lack of continuity is usually a good indicator that there may be changes in the business, and that may have an impact on staff morale, the way the business conducts its activities. I mean, that's a really good telltale signs. If it's a business that's in a regulated market, for example, FCA, and there are notices or certain reprimands made by the FCA, then that's also another indicator to what to kind of expect. Sometimes we go into meetings and management are really, open and honest about what's working and what's not, and so we can take lots of intel from that as well. But also, I think given some of the depth and breadth of clients that we currently have, there are signposts and intel that we can pick up that's affecting the sector as a whole. So, for example, we know that in the e-payment and payment sector, there's a new set of regulations that's going to come in regarding client monies, and we know from discussions that we've held that this is an area where many organisations, particularly the smaller payment companies and e-payment companies, they just haven't got the bandwidth and the expertise. So there's kind of sector-wide intel that we can take. There are things that we can pick up as part of our engagement with those organisations, and there are also, I think if we look at this under the wider economic kind of situation and geopolitical, and we know that, some of that impact, for example, given some of the geopolitical news in America and Venezuela, we know that may have an impact on the gas and oil industry. So there's things that we can actually pick up and take intelligence from there as well.
There's an awful lot of that happening at the moment.
Yeah.
That was the main topic of discussion on Acumen Analysis' last episode, actually. And I suppose, with the word audit is a bit of a word that kind of conjures up tick boxing. Sort of a kind of checklists, and or at least it does for me because I've been in audit for so long. Excellent audit, that is. And for some people, they wouldn't understand how you are an advisor to management, like we've said earlier. What separates the tick boxing sort of internal auditor from the value added or the advisor?
Yeah. So I think that terminology, if we look back at the origins of internal audit, it's almost born out of your financial or internally your financial tick and bash type work that traditionally used to be done by internal audit. But I think that role, as I said before, has changed somewhat over the years. You're right. It's much more trusted advisory work. It's almost Some of it is consultancy type work as well, which isn't internal audit. It's separate, but there's almost an overlap to some degree. And I think that needs to be absolutely distinguished between the two. It's no longer, rather than it's not. It's no longer being seen to be tick and bash type work or bean counting. I think there is some element of that still, but I think if you look at the bigger picture, the role of internal audit is much more different now than it's.
Is there something that we're doing that we think is a little bit more unique?
Absolutely.
I mean, I think as a firm, we're solutions focused. That's across all service lines.
Yeah.
Solutions focused. We absolutely look to find ways to say yes and support clients. You know, if someone comes to us with a problem, we try and find a way to help them out. And I think with some of the bigger firms, it has to be this way.
Yeah.
You have to do step one, then you have to do step two. And I think sometimes that's really important to do, you know, this prescribed step by step.
Yeah.
You know, depending on what we're talking about. And then sometimes it's not necessary, it's not helping the client, and the client needs something a bit more bespoke. They need something a bit different, and they need someone to really listen to them, understand, and act. Yeah. And I think that's...
No, I totally agree. I think just to sort of add to that, I think the solutions focus is so important, but also quite bespoke in our approach. So we don't just provide generalist advice. We look at each client in their own entirety, and we would come up with a solution that is fit for them. And because we haven't got multiple departments and red tape breathing from above and people to report to below us, we can actually make those decisions based on what's right for them. Also, the bit around value added, that's so important. You know, we're not doing internal audit for the sake of doing internal audit. You know, we'll do it because it's proportionate and it's practical and it's value added. And just to give an example, meeting with a prospective client last week, and it wasn't a huge organisation. I think they had a turnover of about 20 million, but they were willing to. I was asked if we can audit every risk in the risk register. Was about 30 risks. I said, well, actually, we could certainly do it, but I don't think you're going to be getting value for money, because from a proportionality perspective, the benefit you're going to get from our work, the cost of it is going to significantly outweigh the benefit. But what we can do is take a risk-based approach. We could maybe look at your top 5 or 6 risks and develop a strategy, an audit strategy that would target those areas. And over 3 years, we can probably look at your 15, 20 high risk, and appreciate this is a journey, and it's probably going to change over time. So that way you've got more of a holistic view, and that seemed to be taken. It went down really well.
It's a good example of us actually looking after our clients and sort of keeping their interests at the centre of what we're doing. Yeah. And you're right, you know, focusing on the high impact or high likelihood risks. That's where the value is in that particular assignment.
Yeah, absolutely. Because in an ideal world, because of time limitations, resource limitations, you can't audit everything. So you have to be smart and savvy and take a kind of risk-based approach on what are the high priority risks, and how can we actually leverage our own expertise and add value to that our clients.
And then I suppose we've kind of covered an awful lot of what we wanted to get into today, but there's hopefully people who sit on boards of businesses and organisations and leaders of businesses or organisations, and I guess it'd be good for us to give them one takeaway that they should really kind of make sure is sort of almost put to the forefront of their mind as they walk away from this video.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my main message will be internal audit is and should be seen as a trusted advisory role for many of our clients, as opposed to a necessary evil. And its true value is appreciated when there's buy-in from the wider stakeholders, and it doesn't necessarily need to be a huge program of work. Internal audit can be tailored and chopped and changed based on the needs of the organisation. Obviously, some sectors there are mandated and there's a minimum set of work that needs to be done. But in other sectors, there's more kind of flexibility of how we can add value and help the organisation achieve their goals and objectives.
Awesome. Yeah, and yeah, we can absolutely do sort of like mini projects. People have done that
Yeah.
before.
Yeah, absolutely. One-off. We've done one-off type of works. Some clients we have cyclical program of work, so over a 3-year period. Other clients, as you rightly pointed out, it's more one-off type reviews. It could be whether that's internal audit work, or it could be an advisory piece of work, or it could be a thematic review. It all varies. We're happy to guide and provide advice as and when.
Well, thanks everyone for joining us on Acumen, and we'll be in touch soon with more breakdowns of departmental offerings. Catch you soon.